I really believe this is the most important piece of work in the sector that has taken place in the last, at least, let's say, 5 years, right? And why is that? Because the whole objective of the Commission on Water was to reset the water narrative, the water action plan, and even the water stakeholder group. What was happening is that we were just falling into rabbit holes constantly, various rabbit holes when it came to water, and there was no real progress on water, no progress on financing, no progress on policy or on infrastructure or on, just simply innovation. There are companies like Xylem, which are doing a great job, but not enough. You need much more. So this, the idea behind the work of the Commission was to recast water as a global issue, not as a tiny little mayor, city level or town level issue, which is one of the rabbit holes that I mentioned, And so to cast it as a global issue and to relook at water as a completely integrated sector across an entire hydrological cycle and see what solutions we can come up with. I think number one, we have to look at, as I said, water as an integrated hydrological cycle between green and blue water. And this is one of the fundamental pillars of this report. Number two, we have to look at new governance models. This is policy, but importantly, institutions that support the policy. Okay. Number three, again, as I said, we have to look at new innovation models. Yes, there's innovation, but how is it being applied? How is it being integrated to actually create new business models? So innovation is not just on the tech bit, but it's also on the business model side, right? And part of that business model is what people keep talking about all the time, which is valuing water or pricing water or coming up with a better sense of what water is worth in today's world, right? The next piece to look at is really new infrastructure models. Water has always been a very capital intensive, very centralized infrastructure model. I'm not sure that that's the model of the future, given the way we are growing as a population everywhere, And then finally, and then you have to look at what I call the social inclusion model, if you will, because so far it's the only social piece to water was it's a fundamental human right. Yeah, fine. Of course it is. What are we doing about it? How are we putting the social inclusion part as an integral part of the water model in any country or in any city or in any, we're just not doing enough of that. We have to. And finally, if we do all those things successfully, we have to come up, and they will come up because it's just going to happen. We have to come up with new financing models and financing, not necessarily instruments, because people keep talking about instruments. It's really models, the give and take in a finance deal and how that applies to the water sector.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's actually one of my next questions is sort of, if we change this framework, where does the money need to come from and where does it need to go? Because I think that's the ultimate question.
The money will come from wherever it sits. There's plenty of money out there. There's no lack or dearth of liquidity. This is the thing to keep in mind. There is a lack of financing and business models and a lack of true partnership between the traditional and non-traditional actors in the water sector. And I'm hesitating saying public-private because that's what we always say. I'm saying traditional and non-traditional. Lack of understanding to see how to finance this thing. See, because if you talk to a finance person like myself, and if I wasn't a water person, I'd say, there's no way I'm going to fund it, right? I'll never get my money back. And if I get my money back, it's going to be at an unacceptable rate of return. Maybe, right? Maybe that may be true, but it's probably not true. In 9 out of 10 cases, it's not true. We just have to work on it. We have to think together on that. So the money's there. The partnerships have to be developed properly. The type of financing has to be developed properly. And in my thinking, right, as a final point to your question, I believe blended finance 2.0 will consist of 3 pieces compared to blended finance 1.0. which was just policy and finance together. 2.0 has to have policy, of course, has to have finance, but it also has to have social inclusion. So if you think of a structure, it has to have a policy piece, obviously a finance piece, but then a social instrument of some sort in order to ensure this social equity issue that has dogged this sector forever and continues to unreasonably, in my view, as a water person. I think it's just something we shouldn't get stuck on, and we are.
Right. And is that something that, so the report talks about just water partnerships. Is that what these partnerships are supposed to
That's exactly right. Water justice is not some loose, weird, concept. It's a concept that that invites action, that invites structuring, that invites models, and so on and so forth. So it's very, yes, the report pays a lot of attention to water justice. I mean, as a concept. Yeah, there is no trade-off, because trade-offs mean zero-sum games, and zero-sum games mean there's a winner and there's a loser. So what we're saying in the report is that you have to have both. You have to have the efficiency piece, whatever that means, and that typically means the technology, the infrastructure model, the policy framework around it. That all creates the efficiency. But you also need the equity piece, because I'll tell you, Tallulah, going forward in tomorrow's world, without social equity or social inclusion up there with financial return and economic return and policy return, we're not going to make it. That's why we're saying there's no trade-off. And Ngozi is absolutely right. I am optimistic. I'm optimistic because this report is putting down a pathway that has not been looked at before. So it's a very sort of comprehensive pathway. It's an integrated pathway that brings those various strands of required action together, as I said, finance, innovation, governance, social, all those. So that's why the optimism. I really believe it's going to be a substantial step forward. Now, the caution comes from simply that we need to bring together the required partners and stakeholders in moving forward. That is always more difficult than what we think it will be, right? And there's all sorts of partners that have to come together, including legacy actors, as I call them, who may be disadvantaged, at least initially, from a new look at water. And I think we need to bring everybody around a given table in order to move forward. So I'm optimistic, more than cautiously optimistic, but less than wildly optimistic.
Right. Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, I think that what you were just saying at the end there kind of leads on to my final question, is that, so first of all, who are those, who are the people, the stakeholders that you really want to hear this message? And what, if you had, 30 seconds to say the most important thing to them, what would it be? The most important set of stakeholders who need to hear the message, in my view, are the politicians / policymakers. In my view, the private sector, even civil society and others, have been more willing than not to participate. But everybody always says we're lacking the political willingness, we're lacking the regulatory and policy frameworks in order for us to work efficiently and in a productive way in this sector. So the message from the report, I'm not saying this only because I'm coming out of the United Nations, but that's the first group that should embrace the messages of the report.